recognize the army that is at work behind the scenes. You know who you are. I know you don't. You guys at Advent don't want to be recognized, and we've got more than that in here. There's more there. That's fine. Just sit down. Just ignore me, since Pastor Feeney's here. That's fine. Okay. So you're going to be hearing more about our capital campaign. The next 4 days, we've got meetings in some way, shape, or form for our leadership, chairman's dinner, newly elected officers, boards, chairs as well. So the next 4 nights are pretty busy here at Advent. Okay. Pay attention to calendar. We've got Sunday School Rally Day coming up. Not next Sunday, but the Sunday after Labor Day. Also starting in here Sunday morning will be a new Bible study on the Gospel of Mark by our own Reverend Aaron Schultz. And then I will be teaching a form of faith, adult membership, catechism, refresher course in the library. So if you've got some friends, you got some family, visitors, if you've been with us, you want to learn more about the Lutheran Christian faith, come join us in the library on Sunday morning starting September 17th. Don't forget this Wednesday, parents and youth for catechism. We've got a parents information meeting Wednesday night. We've got a taco bar that's going to be provided for you at 6:30, and then we'll go through the confirmation program. Classes on Wednesday start Wednesday, September 6th. Vespers will begin again as well. 7 o'clock p.m. Vespers every Wednesday. Don't forget about Matins every day, Monday through Friday. Okay, any other quick announcements from chairman, head elder, boards, committee members? If you're not receiving the Friday email, check your spam box first, or you haven't signed up for it. So that's our primary means of communication besides Facebook. That'll keep you with what's going on. So, are we up? We're up.
Well, yeah.
That's good. Okay, I'll sit down here and keep an eye on it.
Okay.
So,
well,
okay.
I'll get to this later.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, let's pray real quick, and then we have with us today Reverend Dr. John Feeney, as I mentioned, our founding pastor here at Advent, and you have someone special with you. You brought a young lady with you.
Yeah, where is she?
Solveig. Okay, your wife Solveig. Okay, let's pray real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Feeney. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Almighty and merciful God, by your gift alone, your faithful people render true and laudable service. Help us steadfastly to live in this life according to your promises, and finally attain your heavenly glory. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pastor McKay. It's not very often that a pastor can be so gracious towards his predecessor because he finds out from people all the mistakes that his predecessor made. So today, my mission was going to be about a threefold mission. Not totally clear, but first to perhaps give you a bit of an overview about where we have been over the past couple of years. And then also to talk a little bit about some aspects perhaps of that building process of our congregation, and then to maybe, if I can find it on my computer, a little bit more information about the coming 2024 Heritage Tour that I think Pastor McKay asked me to do. Pastor McKay is telling everybody that I asked him if I could, and so we're going to kind of work our way through that to give you a little background about what is coming in 2024. To begin with, I feel kind of odd that my wife is sitting back so far. Is it possible to come up here, Solveig? She's a woman of authority. She says to one, come, and he comes, and to another, go, and he goes. So I will do whatever it is that she wants to do. Yeah, thank you. She's not going to quite do that, I don't think. And usually a little crown here. Maybe if somebody has some napkins, we might grab something here. That'd be great. Sylvia and I, but we retired 2018 at the end of the Heritage Tour that we had, and we took a little vacation down to an island called Malta, and we discovered that in Malta, if you want to see Malta, that there are no road signs, and so you have to go by GPS. So we rented a little scooter, and by that I mean little, because it was what I call the ring-a-ding-ding-ding-ding scooter. And Solveig sat in the back, and she put plugs into her ear from her phone on the GPS. And as we drove through the island of Malta, she would hit me on this side and go like this, and hit me on this side and go like this. And we eventually made our way around. This is, of course, where it is that the Apostle Paul had been shipwrecked on the island of Malta. And so it was a great joy. Then the second thing that we did is we went down for 4 months to the island of the Grand Cayman, the Cayman Islands, and they had lost their pastor. The pastor had not received any funding. They were relying upon people like us to go down and volunteer our time in order to work with this ministry. But the goal that we had was to try and make it possible for this congregation to have a pastor on a more full-time basis. And so we spent 4 months down there. It was a real tough assignment. I baptized Solveig every day in the ocean. But we had some interesting experiences. One of the pastors, or one of the parishioners who had recently kind of been a part of that congregation, or he was on a smaller island off of the Grand Caymans, he passed away. And what I learned was that many of the people from Grand Cayman, there were about 200 and some people they believed that were Caymanites that actually were not living on the Grand Cayman Islands, because it was not a place where people could really financially do very well. They produced nothing other than rum. And so even though they produced that didn't help make things any better. But some of them went to an island off the coast of Cuba, and then when Castro took over, many of them fled to Miami, and then from Miami, some of them started coming back, and this guy came back, and he'd passed away. So I went to go and do his funeral. And I thought everybody in the Grand Cayman, because it was so hot down there, I thought I wore my white sport coat and to do this funeral, and I got there, and every single person there was in black. And so this guy came up to me and he said, I thought that in the United States I didn't know that in the United States that people wore white for funerals. Well, no, not really. So anyway, it turned out that actually this guy was related. Many of them are related. The Grand Cayman, as you know, is it's a British protectorate. And so it goes all the way back to the Scottish people who were there first. They had slaves, and many of the slaves took the names of the people of the plantation owners where they were. So we got there, and the premier of the Grand Caymans was there, and all of his co-workers were there. It was kind of the royal entourage of Caymanites. And I got to preach. And so I preached away, and everything seemed to have gone well. And afterwards, this guy with this very long sailor-looking beard came up to me, and he said, "That was the best Lutheran sermon I have heard in years." I said, "Oh, are you a Lutheran?" He said, "No, I'm an Anglican." But anyway, we did enjoy our time, and we were able to actually make it possible for the congregation through negotiations with the Missouri Synod to call a pastor. And I think he was here, wasn't he? Yeah. And one of the reasons why it is that we were trying to be so insistent about who they called was that a good number of people in the Cayman Islands are actually from the part of the British Empire, but particularly South Africans. And now our pastor there in the Grand Cayman is actually a former South African. Last year, 2 years, year and a half ago, I took a call. It was really intended to be an interim situation to the University of Colorado at the campus ministry. And again, the goal there was to try and save the congregation from foreclosure. The board of directors had kind of been washing their hands of it, and they were thinking that they wanted to shut it down. A lot of the local congregations thought it was an important ministry. So I arrived and tried to be able to find some way of being able to convince the board of directors that they should maintain the ministry of the campus ministry. And so I did popsicle ministry. You probably are wondering what I mean by popsicle ministry. Well, I couldn't figure out how to be able to talk to college students. Not to say that college students probably are difficult to talk to, but you just don't go up to them and start talking to them on campus and such. So it was a really hot day, and I just went down to the local supermarket and I bought a bunch of boxes of popsicles. And I got out on the street and I said, if you answer a 3-question questionnaire, I'll give you a popsicle. And I got 69 students to stop and talk. And really from that, I have to say, the general impression is that college students today are not interested in religion. They are not interested in going to church. They're not interested in Christianity. And strangely found that a lot of them are interested in at some point in their life in having some kind of spiritual life with their family or whoever it might be. They think it's important, but they just, number one, it's at that time of their life that it's rather difficult. And I think actually there is such an ignorance of what Christianity really is. They have a longing for it, but they don't know what they're really longing for. And that's why I think today the broader challenge in the church is for us to somehow bridge that gap. And it's a huge gap because, as you know, it's like trying to teach advanced math to people who don't even know how to count. You have to build, right? I mean, it's been a long time since I've been taking any classes in mathematics, but you have to build. So there's no foundation there. And I would hope that there might be some way that we could somehow break through. There was one particular individual, we gained some new students, but there was one particular individual that I was really very interested in seeing what would happen to him in the future, because the students come and go. And he was the great-grandson of the king of Thailand. And I confirmed him and baptized him, and now he is back in Thailand, and he converted his brother to Christianity, but he is also going to have to pay the price, because in Thailand, especially if you come from these noble families in Thailand, they are dead set against anybody in their family becoming Christians. So it was really wonderful to be able to see somebody who was willing to pay the price. And a college campus is one of the best places for us to do world mission work, if we can be effective. Because especially there too, graduate students are coming from all over the world. And so we hope and we pray. Were you going to the University of Wyoming? You were just there because of what? Oh, you teach. Okay, yeah. She was there. She said, I recognized you from that conference. I said, I got COVID from that conference. She said, I got COVID too. We all got COVID. It was terrible. So anyway, we moved on. We moved on now. We're living in California. I thought it was always interesting, especially here, when we would say, we're moving to Colorado, and people would go, Oh. We say, we're moving to California. Oh. It is, California is, it's not as crazy as people would give it credit for. It is, there are different parts of California in the coast. If you, 15, 20 miles, 30 miles from the edge of the coast, that is the California most people probably are looking at. There's a very conservative element in California that is also, that has no voice, but they also sometimes are chafing underneath the very liberal, I say liberal politics, but also liberal secularism that is very much there. Our Missouri Synod churches out there are, by and large, suffering. Many of them are dying. I have been asked to preach in a congregation in Mission Beach. Mission Beach, this congregation is down to maybe 15, 20 people, plus 2 dogs. They bring them to church. And this is a congregation that at one time had 1,000 members. So that part of it is a real challenge. We live in a city called Carlsbad, and we are living in a little cottage that is behind our daughter's house. And it's probably too small for us, but at the same time, when you live in California, you have to pretty well accept whatever small thing you have because you can't afford. It's a very expensive place. Which, by the way, Colorado is probably becoming every bit as expensive as California, because so many people from California have now moved to Colorado. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are. We've spent the last 3.5 weeks up in the wilderness of northern Minnesota, and I spent a lot of time fixing up the outhouse so that my daughters-in-law might possibly consider coming up and visiting our cabin. I don't know what scares them. You just say, "Don't look down." Yeah. Anyway. Joe Zagel knows what I'm talking about. He's kind of the author and the father of our cabin up there. He and Tom went up there and spent, I think at least in one stay, just an entire month up there, just working up there. And so he's, huh? You built the outhouse, that's right. You had some ownership there. I did want to transition over into just a little discussion about this piece of art. When I was out in California, we started taking some sculpture classes, and I did a couple of sculptures up to this time, and I decided that I wanted to do a religious relief. And so this sculpture that I have done is a clay sculpture, but it is a sculpture of the Virgin Mary who is holding the baby Jesus. And I call it a sword through her own soul. It's, if you remember that Mary, when she goes into the temple to dedicate Jesus at the temple in Jerusalem after his birth, this wise sage comes up to her and he says, "This child is set for the rise and the fall of many in Israel, and a sword will pass through your own soul as well." Well, that sword that passed through her soul as she was watching her son dying upon the cross. You can well imagine what any mother would feel. And so I have the relief of Jesus on the cross in the background, going through his suffering, with Mary holding the baby in her arms. So as I did this, I didn't really have any intention of giving it to Advent, but Pastor McKay saw it on Facebook, and he offered to pay me $10,000 for it. Not really. So I decided that because he thought it was okay, I decided that I would donate it, and of course then I would come out here, and he offered to let me come out and preach on the Sunday that I donated it. I wanted it to be donated in honor of our congregation, because you as a people of Advent have been so incredibly sacrificial in creating a congregation here in the midst of Zionsville and the surrounding community. I can only tell you, after all the traveling that we have done and the places that we have been, you are so fortunate here to have a worship service, that full, wonderful Phil Lehman organ. It's just marvelous. And quite literally, it does. I think it's a Phil Lehman organ too. I mean, it belongs to him. He lives on it, and the spirit of worship and I can only tell you, all through the whole country, the Missouri Synod, along with many other denominations, but the Missouri Synod is suffering enormously. We are an aging population, and yet to see the children, I mean, it's wonderful to see how you're growing as a congregation. Now, I wanted to bring also honor to a guy by the name of Howard Peterson and his wife Lori. I want to preface that by saying a couple of things. One is that the story of the widow's mite is necessary for all of us, because what it is that a person gives when relative to their means is something that only God can ultimately see. And sometimes the sacrifice and the gifts that a person makes when they don't have much, believe you me, sometimes that sacrifice is enormous. We had some members of our congregation that I know had not much, and I know that they gave totally, first with their hearts and then also with their hands. But Howard was a little different, and in the sense that he was a man of means. The Peterson family, fairly well known, they built Castleton Business Park. They built the other park that's across from the interstate there. What's it called? The one that's built around the pond that's next to. Yeah, okay, whatever she says. The precedent, that's it. That takes a while for it to sink in. And when Howard first came to our struggling mission, we were meeting at the Summer Conference Center back over here. He came along with Lori, and I said, I'd like to come out and visit you, which I would do if anybody had visited. And he would say, bring the plans. And so we would go out with the plans, and he'd look at this, and of course what eventually happened was when we bought this property, he went out there and with his son's equipment, and he totally landscaped this entire property out here. But also when we were buying it from the Bennetts, the Bennett family farms, I don't know if you know the Bennetts, they had really received it as an inheritance, and they didn't know much about construction and such, but they wanted to develop it. In order to be able to offer them something more than just dollars, we were initially actually competing with Crystal DeHaan. I don't know if any of you know Crystal DeHaan. She had a house that was right back over there, and she was trying to buy this property to prevent them from, I guess you might say, even abusing this property, but she was kind of into land development herself. When she found out that there was a church that was actually looking to buy this property, to her credit, she backed out. Well, Howard came along and he said, I tell you what, I will build you that road over there, and I will take that road and I will build it all the way back there, so it's just the beginning of the development of this property. And when they heard this, and when Howard does something, he always does it well, when they heard that, that basically kind of sealed the deal for why they would sell it to us. And we paid a whopping $23,000 an acre. So at the time, we didn't think we could even afford that. And somebody, I think it was Sam Hunter, said at that time, he said, they don't make any more land Once you buy it, it's over with. The little piece in the back, way in the back there, they sliced off about 4 acres, wasn't it, in the back, and they used that for a retention pond for their future developments. So we were able to keep it around 20 acres. But had all that not happened, we never would have found a good site. There are a number of other places that we were looking at, that the corner up here, but almost every site, either they were not really interested in selling, or they were just kind of awkward sites. It's very, very important for a church to be in a place with visibility. And this is something which has plagued our churches throughout the entire country. You come along, and of course, we're nice, frugal Germans. You've perhaps heard, have you not heard of how it is that copper wire was invented? 2 Germans fighting over a penny. That we're frugal, and so oftentimes they buy land that's off in some subdivision someplace, and nobody can see it, nobody can find it. This is obviously a very visible property, and had a lot to do also with our growth as a congregation. I will say, I have to take an interlude on the Howard thing, and I have to say this. An individual in this congregation who is just invaluable to us is a guy by the name of Chris Colson. He's hiding over here on the right over here. And we were using a firm called GPD to design that first unit. And Howard, of course, gave him enough trouble in order to be able to make the facility large enough. It was designed to our budget, if you will, and it wasn't their fault. But Howard knew that if we were going to have that little eensy-beensy little building, that we weren't going to be able to have a place of worship that would have been ours for a long time. And so he kept pushing and pushing and stretching and stretching. And eventually even, it was a prayerful thing, even to get the choir loft. That was kind of the last thing. And these guys were just, had enough of us. So they said, oh, but we didn't promise to design anything on the inside. And we're going, we don't have anything designed on the inside? Well, guess who designed the pulpit, who designed the lectern, who designed the baptismal font, who designed all the pews, who designed even the trusses, who designed, I think, if not anything more, but Chris Colson. All this he did. And at that time, it was kind of a time of recession. I think we actually found this company of Amish people or something out, it was in Pennsylvania. And they made all that stuff for us and brought it in, but if it hadn't been for Chris, we never would have been in the good taste culture that we have right now. So thank you, Chris, for all that you've done. Yeah. Actually, if it hadn't been for Diane's whip, we probably never would have gotten it. Anyway, Howard sacrificed enormously. We were getting ready to do development on the property, and on a Thanksgiving morning, I got a telephone call from Howard, and he was practically crying in the telephone. He had lined up all of his son's construction equipment, and a group of people who were what we call eco-terrorists had decided that we were upsetting the development of land, upsetting the land for the deer. And they went through and they cut all the brake lines on all of his equipment and filled his gas tanks with dirt and sand. It caused over $100,000 worth of damage that he bore because of his help out here. I mean, that was just one example. Anyway, through much trial and tribulation, Chris was also, by the way, working on the design here. Woolen Molson, was it Woolen Molson? Yeah, of this space. This kind of got its idea from, we had been in Wittenberg or in Eisenach on the Wartburg, and they have they have a space in the Wartburg, a kind of a hall like this. And so we kind of wanted to be able to reduplicate that. What else? This here, that was done in Siberia by a man who learned how to carve in prison. He became a Christian and eventually became a pastor. I was out in Siberia, and he had carved some tiny, we have a creche. I don't know if you've ever seen that creche. He also had carved that just with a knife that it was broken off. And so I saw that and I said, "Can you do a cross?" And he said, "Sure." And he said, "How big do you want it?" I said, "About this big." And all of a sudden, we got word that it wasn't this big, it was that big. And nobody would send it. So it eventually did get sent out here with some breaks in it. But he carved all that, and that the word at the top, tetelestai, it is finished. It's in the pluperfect. It's an interesting word in the Greek, and I hope that Pastor Schultz is not going to contradict me later on when I tell you what that word means. But if something is in the pluperfect, it means it's once and for all. It's not just that it's happened, but that it has happened with continuing results in the future. When Jesus said, "It is finished," he didn't just mean, "I'm done," or "I'm kind of done now." It meant all sin for all time has been paid for forever. And that's why that is there in front of our congregation. That's what we stand for. Whew. Now, get going here. Our trip. I went and worked really hard yesterday, and I can't find the file. I'm just gonna tell you what it is that we're planning on doing. 2024, on June the 27th, departing here, the United States. Arriving in Frankfurt on the 28th, and traveling to a little town called Wertheim, which is actually on the Tauber River, on the Main in Tauber, and it's a little town with a Franconian castle set up on the back side of the hill. But when we do these tours, you can't travel too far when people have been not getting any sleep over the night. So when you get there to Germany, you just go a little distance and then try to be able to get some rest in a nice pastoral little town with little houses on the side of the river. The next day, we're going to get up and we are going to travel to Coburg. This is the city where the great fortress, it was the southernmost part of Saxony, and it's where Luther went as they were presenting the Augsburg Confession. He was there at Coburg, and he was communicating with messengers back and forth, making sure that Philip Melanchthon was actually going to do what he wants Philip Melanchthon to do. Melanchthon was kind of, he was kind of an ELCA Lutheran. Anyway, so overnight there in Coburg, and then we're going to travel from there up to Eisenach. Eisenach is, it's actually I guess you might say, kind of like the hometown of Bach, but Eisenach is where Luther spent time in his youth as a student, and it is up there on the hill, the Wartburg Hill, the castle, where Martin Luther, of course, spent his time in exile while they were looking for him to put him to death. And there he translated the New Testament into the language of the German people, best translation that's ever been done. And from that Wartburg, of course, the Wartburg now stands as a symbol of that great and mighty fortress that is our God. That the fortress almost represents the protection that God gave to him as So we're going to go up there on the Wartburg Castle and spend a little bit of time also in the city of Eisenach as well. After that, we're going to travel to Wittenberg. I declined this time in the tour, the organization of the tour, I declined to include Eisenach, where Luther was born and also where Luther died, only because it has become so modified, and there are so many kind of tourists that are just run through there, and they've modified some of the churches and such, that it doesn't quite have as much of the sense of Martin Luther, I guess you might say. And so we've just decided to go directly to Wittenberg. And there in Wittenberg, as you know, Martin Luther had posted his 95 Theses. He was a professor at the university there. And it was from there, the city of Wittenberg, that the Reformation really had its foundation. So we're going to do a little stopover at a battlefield where the Saxons defeated the Saxons defeated the Thuringians. I'm sure that you're all interested in that. So we're going to be doing a touring of Wittenberg, and then on Thursday, the 4th of July, we're going to Halberstadt and Quedlinburg, and then overnight in an old convent called in Drübeck. Halberstadt was one of the prince-bishoprics at that time. There are a lot of things going on in Halberstadt with respect to the Reformation. And the Quedlinburg is kind of a neat city. Some of you have gone on tours before. Quedlinburg is a city with 1,000 timber frame homes that are still being preserved. And for you ladies in particular, it was ruled, Quedlinburg was ruled by the prioress of a convent, and for almost 1,000 years, women were in charge. So I thought maybe we'd skip that, but probably not. After our little stay there in the Harz Mountains, we were going to go over the top to a castle called Marienburg. It was a castle, as some of you might know this. A lot of people don't quite realize that the kings of England were actually Germans. At least the House of Windsor today used to be called the House of Hanover. George I, who had been the elector of Hanover, because Parliament had decided that they had to have a Protestant king, there were 16 other Roman Catholics that were actually in line to become the next king or the queen of England. And they passed them all over and went for this Lutheran named George in Hanover. And so he ended up becoming the first Hanoverian king of England. And Hanover then really kind of became, if you will, a principality or a domain of the British. But when they ended up having a female queen, the Constitution of Hanover would not allow a female monarch. And so one of the sons of the Hanoverians came over to become what we call George V. And he built this beautiful castle for his wife. We're going to go there, and then we're going to go to the city of Hamelin. If you remember the story of the Pied Piper, it's considered to be one of the most beautiful cities in all of Germany. And then from Hamelin, we're going to go up to a city called Lübeck and Lüneburg. Lüneburg is where Bach did his schooling at the what was it called? There are two schools there that are still in existence today. One that Bach attended, and one where Bach played the organ. And then we're going to go on to this Hanseatic city. For those of you that don't know about Hanseatic cities, these were the northern cities that formed a league. It included cities in Norway, cities in Sweden, cities in Denmark, and in particular this city called Lübeck, which is there. And then from there, we are going to go up to a city called Schleswig, and then eventually to a city called Föhr, or to a city called Wieck auf Föhr. If any of you know Janet Rosiniak, you know Janet Rosiniak? Janet's family came from this little island which is just in the North Sea. And this little island has got all these thatched houses and these nice little stone and brick streets and these beautiful little walls with flowers planted in the tops of them. And you ride your bicycles around the dikes of the island, and the water is, they actually take the loamy soil that's in the bottom of this, and they use it for mud baths for people's complexion. And you walk out, and then they have these little huts that sit on the edge of the sea where you go out and enjoy your day, drinking your beer, looking at the naked Germans. They're a little less shy about those things. Every once in a while, something happens in front of you. You do this. My youngest son, Christian, apparently wasn't old enough yet. So he looked at his mother and he said, "Why do they do that?" I don't understand. Well, anyway, you walk through the sea to the island of Amrum when the tide is out, and it's a wonderful experience. Anyway, I have been in communication. We got about 1 minute. I've been in communication with the Propst, the president of our Lutheran churches in Saxony, and they are interested in bringing some of their youth to be with our youth, so that we have a nice little youth experience on the island of Föhr in the city of Wieck. So if you'd like to come and join us, this is going to take about 2 weeks, but I've already gotten a Swedish bus driver who is a good, solid Lutheran to bring his bus down from Sweden, so that we don't have to pay a whole lot of money for this tour, and we're trying to bring the cost way down. And our kids, typically our youth, maybe even our teachers if they're young enough, we usually do a third, and a third. And that is, a third of it comes in the form of a scholarship from the church, a third of it by the youth doing fundraising, and then a third of it, where's the other third? The one? Oh, by themselves. Yeah, that's right. So, of course you have to pay for this trip. But only a third. Anyway, we are both adults and youth, and so if you'd like to be able to be a part of this experience, we'll send out more material and have you sign up. But we will need to try to be able to sign up as soon as possible, so that we can start nailing these things down. My estimate is that the land-based cost for something like this is about $3,000. And Zoe and I just got done taking a trip to Scotland and to Ireland, and I got to tell you, $3,000 doesn't go far anymore. And to be able to do a trip like this for $3,000 is a pretty amazing thing. There will be airfare on top of that. So anyway, wish I could show you more pictures. Pastor Aaron, should we end things here? Okay. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever.